Thanks everyone. Sorry for the tech delay. So I'm about 10 minutes late here, but it's all good. Yeah, so I wanted to talk today a little bit about moving a board kind of towards a committee-based board structure. And this is kind of just based on some of my experiences being president for the last 2 years. And then before that, I was a webmaster. I really want this to be kind of more of a interactive session. So I'd really like to get some feedback on some of the ideas I've had, and also kind of learn what your boards are doing and how you're structuring your boards. Yeah, let's get started. Just a little bit about me. How do we get rid of that? How do we get rid of that little thing there?
Oh, you gotta move your mouse over to that screen.
Okay.
Who's sharing? In the front?
Yeah.
Whose computer? Whoever's sharing the game, they gotta put that.
Because your screen is extended, so you just
Yeah.
move the mouse over into that screen. There
Oh,
it is.
There we go. There we go. All right, thank you. Now I get the mouse out. Okay.
All right.
So just a little bit about me. I was I left on JET out of the Boston Consulate in 2012. I was in Tanegashima Island from 2012 to 2016, which is in Kagoshima. Has anybody ever heard of Yakushima Island? Okay. Yeah, I was in the island next to that, so it's pretty famous. It's also where the rockets are launched from. So if you saw the Japanese rocket launch last week, I live like 10 minutes from there. So it was a pretty cool place to be placed. After I got back from JET, I moved to Denver, and I got involved with the JET Alumni Association in Denver just because I was completely new. I didn't know anybody, and I really wanted to meet new people and just connect with people based on our mutual love of Japan and the JET program. Right now, I'm a tax data analytics consultant at KPMG in Denver. So kind of my history with the board. I joined the board in March of 2012. Before I moved to Denver in 2017, I was a general member for 3 years, a very active general member. But I was kind of too busy to be on the board during that time. And so I was very active, and I joined the board in March of 2020, basically right as COVID was starting. So I was never on the board in the pre-pandemic time. Which kind of gave me, I thought came to give me a new, interesting perspective I'll talk about a little bit later. And then in April of 2021, I stepped into the president's role, actually 2022. So I've been president for about a year and a half now. So why do I want to lead a discussion on organizational board structure? Like I said, I had kind of a unique perspective, I thought, on just kind of how the board works, because I didn't get to be on the board like before the pandemic started. My first 2 years on the board, we didn't really get to do a lot of in-person things. I'm sure a lot of other chapters kind of had the same experience. We had a lot of kind of life disruptions. The board routines and processes were kind of disrupted. We had kind of high board member turnover. We didn't have as much chance for in-person engagement during that time. So by the time I became president last year, we had a pretty new board. I don't think there was anybody. There was only 2 people on the board who had been on the board prior to the pandemic, and so kind of all of that, those challenges we had there during the pandemic, they kind of carried forward because we kind of lost kind of our board culture and processes and routines. And so I started to kind of notice some things in the way that our board was structured that weren't really working very well. And this is kind of a list of things. Obviously, burnout. We talked about burnout in the last section with Lily. She gave a really great presentation on burnout. I think in our case, it was more because we had so many new members, and everyone, I think, was kind of felt a little bit isolated because we didn't have a lot of in-person engagement, and everybody was kind of doing their own job on the board, and they were in their own lane, and there wasn't a lot of collaboration or cooperation. I think the burnout was kind of due to more like isolation more than anything. Not that we were working too much. It was just people didn't have like a connection to other people on the board. High board turnover, disengagement in boardroom among some of the senior Senpai members. We had a couple of members who they'd been on the board from before the pandemic, but they kind of gradually kind of became disengaged, and I think they were kind of doing the same job over and over again. And I think they were kind of getting a little bit bored and disengaged. And we also had a lack of redundancy in essential board capabilities. And I'm thinking about like kind of technology stuff and also just the GIA and the finance stuff. That's really important stuff. Obviously, you can't run the board without that. And we went a couple of years with a treasurer that wasn't super engaged, so nobody really trained him and showed him how to do anything, because the previous treasurer had already left and took a couple months to find a new treasurer. So we had a couple of kind of gaps in really essential capabilities just to run a board, just to keep the lights on. And then we also had kind of a lack of agility in recruiting and retaining board members. And what I mean by that was we seemed like we had these very rigid positions that we set up, and we were always had a position empty. And so we were always looking for people to join the board and fill a position, even if we couldn't find someone that necessarily wanted to do that. And sometimes we found people that were interested in being on the board, but they didn't want to do that position. For example, like newsletter editor. We had a newsletter editor. It was empty for like 6 to 8 months. And I met a couple of people who were interested in being on the board, but they didn't really want to be the newsletter editor. And we didn't have the board set up in a way that we could say, well, what do you want to do? You know, we had these very rigid positions. And then, of course, the next thing which we talked about, you guys talked about this a lot.
Oh, yeah.
This is how I felt like as president my first year when I was president, because we had all these board positions and a lot of them were new. They didn't have, a lot of the members were new on the board. They didn't have a lot of turnover from the previous board of the previous people in those positions. And even though I'd only been on the board for a couple of years, I was like the senior member. So it seems like everything was coming through me, and we didn't really have a great lines of communication between the board members. There was a little bit, but it seemed like everything was coming through me. And as you can see, my head started to explode a little bit. And that doesn't even include our like organizations like CLAIR, MOFA, JET USA, USJETAA. They were all, I had to connect the board members to them to get what they needed to do. Like I had to connect the treasurer to them. And it just seemed like everything was coming through me after that my first year on the board. At the end of that first year, I was feeling really burned out, and we had a couple of members on the board who had been on the board for a few years, but they decided to step down just because their time had come. We had a couple members who joined that year, but I think they got burnt out just after a year and they left. So after last year, it was just me and then my vice president, Brad. And then we had our secretary stayed on too. So we had like 3 board members. But fortunately, Brad and I together, we recruited a few more board members. So we started the year with 8 board members. But I kind of wanted to use what I learned from my first year. Just how this seemed like how our board was structured. Like we had all these different, like 8 different positions. We had someone filling all of them, but it was very president centric and everything was going through the president. And I just couldn't handle it myself, and it was inefficient. And it also led to some of the issues that were on the last slide. I think some of the board members started to all kind of feel some of these issues. But I was kind of thinking, like, how can we address this? And I started to think, like, instead of having all these people kind of working by themselves, why don't we think about making like, committees so that people will be in smaller committees, we'll have people to work with, closer to work with. and it also kind of really reduces the stress of the president. Everything's coming through the president. The committees are working on things with each other, and they're communicating with each other. And then I was also hoping that maybe some of the committees would communicate more with the with some of our outside organizations like CLAIR and MOFA. So that was kind of my vision for the year. So, and then there was a couple of other specific areas where the way we had this structured, it just wasn't working well. And the first one was our kind of marketing and communication strategy. It felt like we were getting content from inside the board and outside the board. We had a social media coordinator, webmaster, and newsletter editor. They were getting all this content, and they were all kind of working separately to create content on their own different channels. And it led to, I thought, it seemed like it was duplication of effort. Like they were all three trying to advertise and market board events. So they were all duplicating effort, but it was also a lack of a consistent message. I don't know if anyone here has experienced where you have like something that's advertised on your website, but it's not on your social media, or vice versa. And people go to your website and they're like, well, I saw it on your social media, but then I went to the website and I couldn't find anything about it. And so that was another area where I thought we could really improve our operations and kind of the marketing communications by improving the way we structure our strategy with how we disseminate our message. Has anyone else ever had experienced these issues with like creating a consistent message with all of our marketing and communications platforms? Yes. I have experience with that. Yeah. Do most people in your boards, do you have like a separate newsletter editor and webmaster and social media coordinator?
No.
You have like one person doing everything, or like, are you?
Secretary.
Okay. And so you do all of that on your own?
Yeah.
Okay.
And sometimes I usually get, and then we have Instagram. I'm like, whoops.
Yeah. It's so much, and then you don't. That's not even considering like social media. You have like 5 different channels to go to, and it's also stressful for the events coordinator because they plan these events, and then they have to contact like 3 different people to get their events organized. So, and Brad and I are working on this together this year. We're trying to kind of reorganize our marketing communications, and I wanted to kind of look more like this, where we've got like one content manager that manages all the content. We have a way of intaking content from like internal board, external board. For example, if we have an event coming from JASC, Japan American Society, or another Japanese related event in the community, everything comes into the content manager. The content manager pushes it down into a newsletter, and that gets sent out to everyone. And then our social media and our website, we can take content from the newsletter and use that to make our social media postings and kind of have that as a scheduled process. And I'm hoping that that's going to lead to like one unified and consistent message to the chapter members. Does anyone have any feedback on this or any thoughts on? Yeah.
Can you just explain? So the content manager basically takes internal board stuff, external board stuff, and they format it into a newsletter. Yeah. And then after the newsletter is published,
on the social media channels and the website. That's kind of what I was thinking. Yes.
If you use something like
yeah. Okay. Does your board use something like that?
Well, at my job.
Oh, okay.
Cool. I mean, speak specifically.
Yeah.
Best, but there are others.
Yeah. So it's still kind of we're still working on this, still kind of a work in progress. But it's kind of our vision for how this is all going to work out, just so our marketing communications is much more unified, much more consistent.
Yeah, so to this chart, were we thinking like this is the marketing and communications committee?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So this could be like, this could be 1 to 3 people. You know, if you had one person that wanted to do all this, they could, but you could also have like content manager and a social media manager and a website, a webmaster, you know, managing all of this. So it could be like 1 to 3 or maybe even 4 people. And that's why what I was talking about earlier, if we have somebody that's super passionate about this stuff, but so all these positions are filled, we just add somebody to this committee and they can help out. You know, it makes us much more flexible and agile and recruiting people and also retaining people. If somebody's bored with what they're doing and they want to switch to doing more of something like this, we can always add someone to this committee and make it easier and reduce the workload. So yeah, this would be like a 1 to 3 person committee. Right now we have about 3 people working on this. Brad's kind of taking the charge on it. So
You just called your marketing and communications committee?
yes, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, marketing communication.
Yeah. So it's me. I came onto the board late last year as the webmaster, and when we had elections at the beginning of the year, I took on the VP role, and we brought in another webmaster who has some coding experience. We brought in one of our alums is a really fantastic content manager. And between the 3 of us, we really kind of have all those bases covered. So we can kind of like manage the incoming content really well, and then we can delegate through kind of like internal board communications, like, hey, this needs to be on the website, like here are the images, here's the content that needs to go up. And then like, once it's on the website, we can say, all right, now we make an Instagram and a Facebook post that links back to that. And it's like, we kind of have this really nice cascade of tasks that has been, it's all still new. So we're like working out some of the bugs on how to best communicate what needs to be done by who. But for the most part, managing the tasks and keeping track of what needs to be done has been much easier than even when I just started as the webmaster, where I was kind of responsible for all of it. In particular, because I'm exceptionally bad at doing social media stuff. So it's nice to have the whole team to be able to lean on for that.
So yeah, before we had 3 different kind of channels of communication. We had a newsletter, we had a webmaster, and we had a social media manager. Now it's all in one process. And then the next area of the board where I thought we could kind of move to more committee structure was events. Do most boards have like an event person? Do you have like one person?
It's one person.
Yeah. My experience with our events coordinators, they were the person most likely to get burnt out because like I always like about 70% of what we do is planning events, you know, and I think at a lot of boards. And so you had like one person doing 70% of the workload, and you had the other people on the board doing 30% of the workload, where the work kind of ebbs and flows a lot. But the events coordinator, it seemed like they were always the most likely to get burnt out. And so I didn't want to go into another year with just a single events coordinator. I had a couple of ideas how we could do it. Even last year, I tried to get other board members to volunteer to help with like specific events, but it just was never formalized, and it felt like we were always kind of like, who wants to do this, and given the side eye, you know, you want to do that, you know. And sometimes people would volunteer, but sometimes they wouldn't. And at the end of the day, the events coordinator was doing it all. But then, of course, as president, I felt like I needed to support the events coordinator, so it gave me a lot more work to do as well, because I was helping the events coordinator a lot. So I really wanted to go to a more of a events committee. I had a couple of ideas for it. The one on the left is kind of what we're doing this year, because we got 2 new board members this year who, one of them is actually a professional event coordinator. She did it for profession. The other one was really excited about doing events. So they both really wanted to do events. And since it was the first time we were doing it, we kind of just decided to make them both co-events coordinator. So we kind of just divided the work between the 2 of them based on like what they're interested in, what they're passionate about, who's busy, who's not. But there's also like a kind of another way that I was thinking of it as well, where we could still have one events committee chairperson, and we could have other events committee members who would kind of work under them, but we could also have other board members volunteer for events, like we tried to do before, but it didn't really work. But sometimes people did volunteer. And then I also thought it would give us a really good chance to bring in general member volunteers who they may not want to be on the board fully, but they might want to help with different tasks. And so it would give kind of an organized way for a general member volunteer to come on the board and help out with an event or a couple of events or a series of events without having to be on the board. Yeah.
And one thing I'll say that is awesome about that is, general members, it's quite difficult for them to come on as a board member mid-year. So like when people come back from JET in August, like end of July and August, they can't get involved immediately. But general members can act as members of committees according to our bylaws.
Yeah.
I don't know how all of y'all's are set up, but it makes it so that anyone who is interested, we immediately have places that they can contribute and feel connected and get insight into how the board works and have them move into leadership positions at, you know, either in the next board cycle or whenever they feel comfortable doing it. So it makes it way more agile for incorporating general members into the processes.
Whether it's one coordinator or two co-coordinators, how are you balancing kind of like monthly regular events versus one-off once a year?
Yeah.
Bigger events. Like, are those the same people, or do you have individuals tasked with, hey, this is your monthly event? You have to do that this year.
We're just starting to try to incorporate a routine monthly event into our calendar. So, I mean, we usually do one event per month, but sometimes we will go like 2 months without an event if everyone's busy and there's not much going on anyway. But that's something we're trying to incorporate right now. And one of our co-events coordinators is very Genki about it. And she's kind of taking that on. So yeah, I'm hoping that she'll, going forward, kind of manage the routine monthly event. And then for the other stuff, we can divide it as needed. And obviously the events, that's a big umbrella. It could be so many different things under the events umbrella, ranging from like volunteering, or having a booth somewhere, or having a social event. So
I have issues separating things because I feel like everything is connected.
Yeah.
So it makes the most sense. I've toyed with the idea of having like one person in charge of an entire thing, like an event and its promotion. So my question about what you've laid out here is, how is this events committee, say on the right, the events committee chairperson model, how does that connect with the marketing and communication committee model? Like, would the content manager or the marketing and communication committee create the content for that event, or would the event committee chairperson create the content and then provide the content to the content manager?
That's a really good question. We're still kind of figuring that out. But yeah, but that gets to the kind of one of the last points I was going to make before I finish up here. But this is where we started, and this is kind of where I'm hoping that we get to, just kind of the way our board structure is organized, where we have an executive committee with president, VP, treasurer, and secretary, and the marketing communications committee and the events committee. And they could either communicate directly with each other, or we could set up a process where the events people are able to market events on their own. We're still kind of experimenting with that and trying to figure out what works the best. But yeah, that's like another layer of communication you have to do with the event if you have to then contact the marketing communications committee. So
person in the middle, someone that sits on the events committee also sits on the marketing communications, so they make the marketing and social media posts for the events committee.
But it would have to be the content manager specifically.
So I will say that, like, as the VP and David as the president, we're both very, like, we go to all of these meetings, and so we have like an idea of what's going on and what's happening. I think the key is that you're delegating responsibilities. And so what is happening a lot is that, you know, the entire board comes up, we're going to do this event. The events coordinators kind of get together with the president and the VP, and then we often also have the treasurer in there to talk about finances and what we're doing. once the events committee is and then once the events committee has that, they like find their locations, they set up their budget, that goes around. And then when they're ready to advertise, they just post that. So we use Slack for communication. They just post that in our Slack channel. And then the marketing communications committee sees that. We go, boom, we know what to do. It needs to go on the website, needs to go on Facebook, needs to go on Instagram. If we need to clarify any timeline for when that stuff goes out, we do. But normally that's just included in that communication. And for the last couple events that we've been doing this for, that's actually gone like pretty smoothly. I don't think we've missed any major deadlines, which is always my biggest fear. But
and we've got things on all our channels same time.
And so it's less about needing a person in the middle and just making sure that everyone in the different committees is aware of when they are expected to communicate what to who. And so far, we haven't had any huge snafus, which is nice.
This is a bit of a simplified chart. Like, I really want to, like, the treasurers and the executive committee. We need to have a way for the treasurer to communicate directly with somebody on the events committee, because they need to pay for things. And I want treasurer will be the main person to communicate with CLAIR and MOFA, because that's where most of our money's coming from. And yeah.
So if I could make, based off what I just heard, a design suggestion, which
Yeah.
is also a conceptual suggestion, is more of maybe a then overlapping
Yeah.
to some extent,
Mhm.
where the gray is, because there has to be interconnection.
We need like one person, at least one person connecting each committee and function for sure. Yeah.
I do that all of that. Our president is kind of his good skill is the sport and breaks like that, organizing that for that. So in instant, so using the overlaps in this Venn diagram, or the president is part of the events committee, and I think our VP is fantastic at marketing. He's doing a lot of the Discord side of things.
Yeah.
So he would be like spearheading the marketing committee, and I mean, it depends, of course, on your board and what everybody's good at and what they want to do to avoid that burnout. But having the executive committee like overlap in such a way that one of those members is really a key function.
Have one person on the executive committee be responsible for being the connecting piece between each of the functions.
Right. Secretary, marketing.
Yeah.
A whole lot of things.
And so kind of getting back to that initial table with kind of the concerns I had going into this year and how I wanted to address it, kind of with a committee-based remedy. With burnout, I'm hoping, and we're starting to see some of the results, I think, increased engagement among the board members, between the board members, like our social media, our events person was just, they were all by themselves, doing all this work all by themselves. And I was trying to connect them with other people, but it was just more work for me. But now we're forming like a natural connection between our events people, so that they're working together and they're not feeling as isolated, I don't think. And yeah, less president-centric board operations, so not everything is going through me and I'm not getting as burned out. Higher board turnover, we're hoping that reduced burnout will hopefully lead to reduced turnover next year. And it's kind of the disengagement and boredom among the senpai board members. I'm hoping with this committee structure that as a board member comes on and they serve 1 or 2 years, they can move up kind of more into a managerial or leadership role with some of these committees. So they don't feel like they're doing the really routine stuff that I think was starting to kind of bore some of our senpai members before. Or if they don't feel comfortable taking a managerial or leadership role, they could move to another committee if they're getting bored. If they want to stay on the board, but they're kind of getting bored with what they're doing, they could move to another committee. And it gives us the flexibility to make changes like that without, like this last point, it allows us to recruit for a person, not a position. So yeah, before we were just saying we need a newsletter editor. And if you don't want to be the newsletter editor, too bad. I want it to be more like we find someone who's really engaged with the club, with the chapter. They're really excited and they have a lot of good ideas. Even if there's not a open position on the board at that time for them, or if there's a position they're not interested in, I want to be able to bring them into the board. And I think the committee structure gives us the agility to do that. And then, yeah, lack of redundancy and essential board capabilities. I think the committee structure, because with the marketing communications committee, I'm hoping that there's 3 people on that committee. All 3 of them have a basic understanding of how to do all the essential tasks. So if the person who's mainly doing the website, if they need to step back for a month or 2, and we always tell people, like Lily talked a lot in her burnout talk last session, just about giving people the opportunity to step back if they need some time, something else is going on in their life. But when that happens, you still need to be able to, especially if they have an essential function for the board, you still need to be able to cover that. And so I think the committee structure gives us a way to kind of build that into the board so that everybody in each committee can step in and fill that committee's roles, even if one person on the committee has to step away. So yeah.
You mentioned at the very beginning when you had this building on second home, that redundancy was also a problem in terms of the treasurer and financial aspects.
Yeah.
So are you anticipating any improvements in doing communications between Mocha and CLAIR? They usually want a single.
Yeah, I know.
How are you looking for this?
We have a pretty good relationship with the local consulate, and our treasurer is communicating directly with our JET program coordinator that does our budget, and she doesn't have any problem with communicating directly with the treasurer. With CLAIR, I think our main contact with CLAIR is obviously at the beginning of the year, our GAA request, and then our end of year report, any change of usage forms in the middle of the year. I've always had the treasurer send those emails, and so.
Yeah, I would say the treasurer has historically been the single point of contact for all of that stuff. And I think that the president and the treasurer work very closely together. And from that, like, we also, like, everyone on the board is kind of aware of what the treasurer needs to know in order to keep everything running smoothly. So yeah, I think that like in the future, I could see that being possibly like a bottleneck, but I think one of the biggest things we're trying to do is like the treasurer only has to deal with like the thing that is truly pertinent to the treasurer. So like they're not sitting there also worrying about other things pertaining to any events that are being put on. It's like receipts come in, everything's logged, everything balances out, we're good to go kind of thing. So
yeah, I could see us like just picking one person that always communicates with one of the other higher organizations. We're still kind of working some of this stuff out, but this is just still kind of a work in progress. And I kind of just wanted to talk about it. It kind of forced me to think about the process we're going through, get it on paper, and present it to everyone, and just kind of get some feedback. But it's still definitely a work in progress, and this is kind of our goal for the end of the year to be at this point, going into next year. So we don't have too much time left because of that little snafu at the beginning. But if anyone has any like feedback or comments or questions, just like we have 2 or 3 minutes. But yeah.
I have a quick question. How many meetings do you have, and how long do they take?
Yeah.
I'm curious for other chapters too.
We have one full board meeting a month, but I do encourage people on the committees that if they just stay in communication in between the month. And that was another thing that was tough. Like it seemed like everything was happening so slowly because we were only meeting once a month. And I think it makes it easier for just a couple of people, even if they're just slacking back and forth in between board meetings, to stay in touch rather than just waiting for the entire month for a board meeting to come. Hopefully it will start making things happen a little quicker. Yeah, we still stick to our one board meeting a month schedule.
As a much smaller chapter important.
Yeah.
We certainly have 3 officers.
Mm-hmm.
And those also include our newsletter people and
Yeah.
our financial people and all that kind of stuff. But we actually started a couple of years ago doing a single Google Doc.
Mm-hmm.
And per year, and we always add to the top of here's all the items for this month's
Yeah.
newsletter. And we paying other people, like, oh, here's the book club person, paying the book club
Yeah.
person, assign it to them, and they know to go in and they need to update that before we
Mhm.
launch that newsletter to go.
Okay.
So there's a deadline on it.
Yeah.
But it's an easy way of having everyone just kind of power into the same doc, and then that literally just like copy paste of the election. So, but if that's any interest to you, it's at least a low effort
Yeah.
on a singular person.
Yeah. And yeah, and to your point, this does have some challenges with kind of task management and project management, because we're hoping that the committees kind of work together, and it does like take some work with us kind of monitor it and make sure things are getting done. And that's why I asked Lily in the last thing, was talking about like project management platforms and things like that. So we got some good ideas from that. It's something we're talking about, because right now we just use Slack and we use our meeting minutes, and we try to make a task list from meeting minutes, but it could definitely be better if we don't.
Yeah, Slack is not a project
Yeah.
management solution.
Yeah. So I think we're up on time. So thanks everyone for listening.
All right, everyone, we're going to transition to our last activity at NIS. So if you can please gather your things and head downstairs to B104, please. B104. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.